The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Cedar Ridge's main street as Emma Sullivan gripped the worn wooden wheels of her chair, pushing herself forward with determined strokes. Dust swirled around her modified wheelchair, a sturdy contraption her father had reinforced with iron bands and leather grips after the accident 2 years ago. The familiar creak of the wheels echoed against the wooden storefronts, drawing curious and often unkind stares from the townspeople. Emma's calloused hands never faltered as she navigated the rutted dirt road. Her auburn hair, braided practically down her back, caught the golden light, and her emerald eyes held the same fierce determination that had once made her the finest rider in 3 counties. That was before the Mustang threw her, before the doctors in Denver told her she'd never walk again, before her world shrank to the confines of her father's ranch and the pitying looks of neighbors. The Silver Dollar Saloon loomed ahead, its batwing doors swinging gently in the evening breeze. Piano music and raucous laughter spilled onto the street, mixing with the scent of tobacco and whiskey. Emma had rehearsed this moment 100 times, but her heart still hammered against her ribs as she approached the establishment that represented her last hope for independence. She positioned her chair at the bottom of the 3 wooden steps leading to the saloon's entrance. For a moment, she studied the obstacle that would have been insignificant 2 years ago, but now seemed insurmountable. With practiced efficiency, Emma reached into the leather satchel hanging from her chair and pulled out 2 sturdy wooden planks her father had crafted for her. She positioned them carefully against the steps, creating a makeshift ramp. The process drew attention. A group of cowboys lounging on the porch of the general store began pointing and whispering among themselves. Emma heard fragments of their conversation. Poor girl. Such a shame. What's she thinking? But she kept her jaw set and her movements purposeful. As she began rolling up the planks, the saloon's batwing doors burst open. Silas Crane, the saloon owner, emerged with his massive belly straining against his stained vest. His handlebar mustache twitched as he took in the sight of Emma, positioning herself at his establishment's entrance. "Now hold on there, missy," Silas called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet street. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this ain't no place for someone in your condition." Emma's hands stilled on her wheels. She looked up at Silas, her green eyes flashing with a fire that had nothing to do with the setting sun. "Mr. Crane, I'm here about the serving position you posted. I can do the work." A harsh laugh erupted from Silas's throat. "Serving drinks? Girl, you can barely serve yourself. How are you going to carry trays and navigate around all these tables and drunk cowboys? This is a business, not a charity house." The growing crowd of onlookers murmured their agreement. Emma felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up her neck, but she forced herself to remain steady. She had expected this reaction, had prepared for it, but it still cut deep. "I've figured out ways to—" she began. "Ways to what? Drop glasses all over my floor? Get knocked over by the first cowpoke who's had too much to drink? I got a reputation to maintain here, and I can't have customers feeling sorry for you instead of enjoying themselves." From across the street, Sheriff Jake Morrison had been watching the scene unfold from the doorway of his office. His daughter Lucy sat on the wooden steps beside him, her 7-year-old face scrunched in confusion as she witnessed the cruel exchange. Jake felt his jaw tighten with each harsh word from Silas. "Daddy, why is that man being so mean to the pretty lady?" Lucy whispered, tugging on her father's pants leg. Jake looked down at his daughter's earnest face, then back at Emma, who sat with her shoulders squared despite the public humiliation. Something in her posture, proud, defiant, refusing to back down, reminded him of his late wife Sarah, who had faced down a charging bull to save a fallen cowhand without a moment's hesitation. "Sometimes, sweetheart," Jake said quietly, "people are mean because they're scared of things they don't understand." Silas was still berating Emma when Jake made his decision. He stepped off the porch, his boots striking the dirt with purposeful strides. His sheriff's badge caught the light as he approached the saloon, and conversations began dying as people recognized his authority. "Afternoon, Silas," Jake said, his voice carrying the weight of his position. "Seems like you're conducting business in the middle of the street. Everything all right here?" Silas puffed out his chest. "Just explaining to this girl that she ain't suited for saloon work, Sheriff. Nothing that concerns the law." Jake turned his attention to Emma, studying her face. He saw no self-pity there, only determination mixed with barely contained frustration. Her hands gripped her wheels so tightly, her knuckles had gone white. "Miss," Jake prompted. "Sullivan." "Emma Sullivan," she replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Miss Sullivan, What exactly were you hoping to accomplish here today? Emma met his gaze directly. I was applying for the serving position, Sheriff. I can do the work if given the chance to prove it. Prove it? Silas scoffed. How's she gonna prove she can walk when she's stuck in that contraption? The crowd murmured agreement, but Jake held up a hand for silence. He looked at Emma with genuine curiosity rather than pity, and she found herself responding to that rare courtesy. I don't need to walk to balance a tray or pour drinks, Emma said, her voice gaining strength. I can navigate tight spaces better than most people think, and I won't be stumbling around drunk at the end of a long shift like some of your current help. A few people chuckled at that observation, and Jake noticed Silas's face redden. The saloon owner's current employees were indeed known for their fondness for the merchandise. Jake studied Emma for a long moment, weighing something in his mind. Finally, he looked back at Silas. Seems to me a business owner would want the most reliable help he could find. Competition for good workers is fierce out here. Sheriff, you can't seriously think— I think, Jake interrupted, his voice taking on an authoritative edge, that everyone deserves a fair chance to earn their living. That's what we built this town on, isn't it? The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, as Silas Crane's face turned an alarming shade of purple. He clearly hadn't expected the sheriff to insert himself into what he considered a simple business matter. Emma held her breath, unsure whether Jake's intervention would help or make things worse for her prospects. Now see here, Sheriff, Silas blustered, mopping sweat from his forehead with a grimy handkerchief. I appreciate you keeping the peace and all, but I got a right to hire who I see fit for my establishment, and I don't see fit to hire someone who can't even— Can't even what, Silas? Jake's voice carried a dangerous quiet that made several onlookers step back. Can't even work harder than most folk just to get through each day. Can't even show more courage in 5 minutes than most of us show in a lifetime. Emma stared up at the sheriff in amazement. In all the months since her accident, no one outside her family had spoken about her with such respect. Most people either ignored her entirely or spoke about her as if she wasn't present, discussing her limitations with pitying shakes of their heads. Silas opened his mouth to argue, but Jake wasn't finished. I've been watching this whole exchange, and I haven't seen Miss Sullivan ask for any special treatment or charity. Seems to me she just wants the chance to work. Last I checked, that was something we respected around here. Lucy had wandered closer during the confrontation, her small hand finding its way into her father's larger one. She looked up at Emma with the frank curiosity of childhood, unburdened by adult prejudices. Are you really strong enough to carry heavy things? Lucy asked Emma directly, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from some of the adults around them. Emma smiled for the first time since arriving at the saloon, warmed by the child's honest question. I am, sweetheart. My arms got a lot stronger after my accident. Want to see? Without waiting for permission, Emma reached into her satchel and pulled out a solid iron horseshoe. She held it up and began bending it slowly but steadily, the metal groaning as it yielded to the pressure from her calloused hands. Several men in the crowd stepped forward, murmuring in surprise. Well, I'll be damned, muttered old Pete Thompson, the town's blacksmith. That there's a number 4 shoe takes considerable strength to bend one of those. Emma finished reshaping the horseshoe into a rough heart and handed it to Lucy with a wink. For you, little miss. Something to remember that we all have different kinds of strength. Lucy accepted the gift with wide eyes, turning it over in her small hands. It's beautiful. Daddy, look what she made. Jake examined the bent horseshoe, genuinely impressed. He'd seen grown men struggle to accomplish what Emma had just done with apparent ease. As he handed it back to Lucy, he caught Emma's eye and nodded with something approaching respect. The demonstration had shifted the mood of the crowd. Where there had been pity and dismissal before, now there was grudging interest and even admiration. But Silas remained unmoved. Parlor tricks don't run a saloon, he grumbled. I still say she ain't suitable for the work. It was then that Jake did something that surprised everyone, including himself. Then I'll make you a proposition, Silas. Give Miss Sullivan a trial period, 1 week. If she can't handle the work, she leaves with no hard feelings. But if she proves herself, you pay her the same wage you'd pay anyone else. And if I refuse? Silas asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be to his liking. Jake's hand rested casually on his gun belt, a gesture so subtle it might have been unconscious, but Silas caught it nonetheless. Well, I'd hate to have to start paying closer attention to all the regulations about serving liquor in this town. Health inspections, tax compliance, making sure all your girls have proper documentation. The implied threat hung in the air like smoke from a campfire. Silas's establishment skirted several legal grey areas, and they both knew it. The saloon owner's eyes narrowed as he calculated the cost of cooperation versus the potential consequences of defiance. Emma watched this exchange with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. She had wanted to succeed on her own merits, not because the sheriff had strong-armed someone into giving her a chance, but she also recognized that in a world stacked against her, she might need to accept help wherever it came from. "Fine," Silas said finally, his voice tight with resentment. "1 week. But when she fails, and she will fail, I don't want to hear another word about it from anyone." "Deal," Jake said before Emma could object. He turned to her with an expression that brooked no argument. "Miss Sullivan, you start tomorrow evening. Don't make me regret sticking my neck out for you." Emma nodded, her throat suddenly tight with emotion. "Thank you, Sheriff. I won't let you down." As the crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves about the unusual turn of events, Jake lingered. Lucy had wandered over to pet a dog, leaving the two adults alone for a moment. "Why did you do that?" Emma asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Jake was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than it had been during the confrontation. "My wife Sarah used to say that how we treat people when they're down says everything about who we really are." I reckon she was right. "Used to say," Emma prompted gently. "She died 3 years ago. Fever took her." Jake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Left me with Lucy, and a whole lot of regrets about things I should have said and done while I had the chance." Emma studied his profile, seeing the grief he carried like a weight on his shoulders. "I'm sorry for your loss, Sheriff." "Jake," he corrected. "And I'm sorry about your accident. Can't have been easy." "It wasn't," Emma admitted. "Still isn't most days. But I'm learning that easy and impossible aren't the same thing." Jake turned to look at her then, and Emma saw something in his eyes that she hadn't encountered in a long time, genuine respect, unmarred by pity or awkwardness. It was a look that saw her as a person first, before anything else. "Lucy, come on," Jake called to his daughter, who was still enchanted by the friendly mutt. "Time to get home for supper." As they prepared to leave, Lucy ran back to Emma's chair. "Will you be working at the saloon tomorrow? Can I come see you?" "Lucy," Jake warned gently, "the saloon isn't a place for little girls." "But maybe I'll see you around town," Emma said to Lucy with a warm smile. "I'll keep an eye out for you." As father and daughter walked away, Emma began the process of packing up her wraps and preparing for the journey back to her father's ranch. Her mind was already racing with plans and preparations for tomorrow night. She had work to do and a point to prove, and failure simply wasn't an option. Emma arrived at the Silver Dollar Saloon an hour before opening time, her wheelchair loaded with carefully planned modifications. She had spent the entire night and most of the day preparing for this moment, creating solutions for every obstacle she could imagine. Her father, Thomas Sullivan, had helped, despite his obvious worry about his daughter working in what he considered an unsuitable environment for a lady. "You sure about this, Emma girl?" he had asked that morning, watching her practice maneuvering around makeshift obstacles in their barn. "It ain't too late to reconsider. The ranch always has work for you." But Emma knew that staying safe on the ranch meant accepting a smaller life than she was willing to live. She had thanked her father for his concern and his help, then set out for town with determination burning in her chest like a forge fire. Now, as she positioned her ramps against the saloon steps, she noticed several townspeople had gathered across the street to watch her first day. Word of the sheriff's intervention had spread quickly through Cedar Ridge, and opinions were divided. Some folks were rooting for her to succeed, while others were clearly waiting for her to fail spectacularly. Silas emerged from the saloon's interior, his expression sour as week-old milk. "You're early," he grumbled, watching her navigate the entrance with practiced efficiency. "Yes, sir. I wanted time to familiarize myself with the layout and organize my workspace before the evening crowd arrives." Emma had transformed her wheelchair into a mobile serving station. Her father had helped her attach a sturdy wooden platform across the armrests, creating a stable surface for carrying drinks and plates. Leather straps and clever hooks held glasses securely in place, and she had practiced balancing multiple items until the movements became second nature. The saloon's interior was dimly lit and thick with the lingering sense of tobacco and spilled whiskey. Emma quickly assessed the space, noting the narrow passages between tables and the raised platform where the piano player performed. She would need to plan her routes carefully to avoid collisions and bottlenecks. "Maggie!" Silas bellowed toward the back of the establishment. Come meet the new girl. Maggie O'Brien emerged from the kitchen, a sturdy woman in her 40s with graying red hair and skeptical blue eyes. She had been working at the Silver Dollar for 8 years and had seen plenty of hopeful employees come and go. Her gaze took in Emma's wheelchair with frank assessment. "So you're the one causing all the fuss," Maggie said without preamble. "I heard the sheriff had to twist Silas's arm to get you this chance." "I didn't ask for special treatment," Emma replied evenly. "I just want to work." Maggie studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough, but I'll tell you straight. I've been doing this job since before you were born, and it ain't easy even for someone with 2 good legs. These cowboys get rowdy, especially on payday. They'll test you, push boundaries, see what they can get away with." "I can handle myself," Emma said, though she appreciated Maggie's honesty more than false encouragement. "We'll see. Come on, let me show you how we do things around here." For the next hour, Maggie walked Emma through the evening routine. She explained which customers were regulars, who tipped well and who to watch out for. Emma absorbed every detail, taking mental notes about table numbers, drink preferences, and the unwritten rules that governed saloon etiquette. "The piano player is Charlie Morrison, no relation to the sheriff, far as anyone knows. He plays from 7 until midnight most nights, keeps the mood light, usually, and that table in the corner is reserved for the poker games. High stakes, short tempers. Stay clear unless they specifically call you over." As opening time approached, Emma felt her nerves beginning to flutter. This was it, her chance to prove that she belonged in the working world, that her accident hadn't diminished her worth as a person. She positioned herself near the bar, ready to spring into action. The first customers began trickling in around 6 o'clock, ranch hands finishing their workday looking for a drink and some companionship before heading home. Emma watched Maggie work, studying her technique and timing. When a cowboy at a corner table raised his hand for service, Emma took a deep breath and rolled forward. "Evening, gentlemen. What can I get for you?" The 3 men at the table looked surprised to see her, then exchanged glances that ranged from curious to amused. The one who had signaled was a weathered man in his 50s, with kind eyes and work-worn hands. "Well, I'll be," he said, with a gentle smile. "You must be the young lady everyone's been talking about." "I'm Frank Carson, foreman out at the Double R Ranch. These here are my boys, Pete and Miguel. Emma Sullivan, pleased to meet you, Mr. Carson. 3 whiskeys, Miss Emma, if you'd be so kind. And don't mind the staring. Folks around here just ain't used to seeing someone with your particular brand of grit." Emma served their drinks efficiently, her modified wheelchair allowing her to navigate the narrow spaces with surprising grace. When she returned with their order perfectly balanced on her platform, Frank Carson nodded approvingly. "Mighty impressive, miss. You've got this figured out better than most folks would." As the evening progressed, Emma found her rhythm. She served drinks, cleared tables, and handled money with professional efficiency. Some customers were curious about her story, others ignored her disability entirely, and a few made awkward attempts at conversation. But none of them treated her with the cruel dismissal she had feared. The real test came around 9 o'clock, when a group of young cowboys rode in from a neighboring ranch, already half drunk and looking for trouble. Their leader was a man Emma recognized as Bull Henderson, known throughout the county for his nasty temper and wandering hands. Bull's eyes fixed on Emma immediately, and his lips curved in an unpleasant smile. "Well, well, what have we here? Silas hiring cripples now." The saloon grew quieter as conversations died, and heads turned toward the confrontation. Emma felt every eye in the place watching her response, waiting to see how she would handle her first real challenge. "I'm here to serve drinks, sir," Emma said calmly, rolling closer to their table despite every instinct telling her to retreat. "What can I get for you and your friends?" Bull leaned back in his chair, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "I don't know, boys. Think she can handle serving real men like us? Might be too much excitement for someone in her condition." His companions laughed, emboldened by their leader's cruelty. Emma felt her cheeks burn with humiliation, but she kept her voice steady. "I can handle whatever needs handling, Mr. Henderson." "Oh, you know my name. Good. Then you know I don't like being told what to do by someone who can't even stand up to me." The saloon had gone completely silent now. Even Charlie Morrison's piano had stopped playing as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Emma was acutely aware that this moment would define how she was treated by customers for the rest of her time at the Silver Dollar. That's when Jake Morrison appeared at the saloon's entrance, Lucy safely at home with the neighbor woman who watched her in the evenings. He took in the scene with a lawman's trained eye, immediately understanding the dynamics at play. Bull Henderson was about to learn that some lines should never be crossed. Jake Morrison's entrance into the Silver Dollar was like a cold wind cutting through the stifling tension. His boots struck the wooden floor with measured steps as he surveyed the scene. Bull Henderson leering down at Emma, his cronies snickering behind him, and the rest of the saloon watching in uncomfortable silence. But before Jake could intervene, Emma surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silence, "I notice you and your boys have been riding hard. Your horses look pretty lathered up outside. Must be thirsty work, treating animals that poorly." Bull's face darkened at the implied criticism. "What did you just say to me, girl?" Emma never broke eye contact with him. "I said your horses look mistreated. A man who can't take proper care of his animals usually can't take proper care of much else either." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Frank Carson and his boys exchanged impressed glances from their corner table. Emma was gambling everything on reading Bull correctly, that he was the type of bully who backed down when confronted with confidence rather than fear. Bull started to rise from his chair, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun belt, but Jake's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. "I wouldn't, Bull." Every head in the saloon turned toward the sheriff. Jake stood relaxed but ready, his badge catching the lamplight. His hand wasn't on his weapon, but his posture suggested he could remedy that situation very quickly if necessary. "Sheriff," Bull said, his voice tight with suppressed anger, "I was just having a conversation with the hired help here." "Looked more like harassment to me," Jake replied evenly, "and last I checked, harassment was against the law in my town." Bull's companions shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. They were drunk enough to follow their leader into trouble, but sober enough to recognize when they were outmatched. Jake Morrison had a reputation for being fair but unforgiving when it came to maintaining order. "Come now, Sheriff," Bull said, forcing a conciliatory tone. "No need for legal talk, we're just having some fun." "Fun," Jake repeated, his voice flat. "Tell me, Bull, would it be fun if someone talked to your sister that way?" The reference to Bull's family hit home. His sister Mary worked as a seamstress in town and was known for her quiet dignity and hard work. The parallel between her situation and Emma's was clear to everyone present. Bull's jaw worked silently for a moment before he spoke. "That's different." "How so?" "My sister ain't—" Bull caught himself before he could finish the sentence, realizing the trap Jake had laid for him. "Ain't what, Bull? Ain't trying to make an honest living? Ain't deserving of basic respect?" Jake stepped closer, and his voice carried the authority of years wearing a badge. "Or ain't someone whose dignity matters to the people in this room?" The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Emma held her breath, acutely aware that the outcome of this confrontation would determine not just her immediate safety, but her entire future in Cedar Ridge. It was Frank Carson who broke the tension. The old foreman rose from his table and walked slowly over to where Bull sat. His weathered face was grave as he looked down at the younger man. "Bull, your daddy and I worked together for nigh on 20 years before he passed. Good man, Tom Henderson. He'd be mighty disappointed to see his boy acting like this toward a lady who's just trying to earn her way." The invocation of Bull's deceased father struck deeper than Jake's legal authority or Emma's defiance. Bull's face went through a series of expressions: anger, embarrassment, and finally something approaching shame. "I didn't mean nothing by it," Bull muttered, not quite looking at Emma. "Then prove it," Emma said quietly. "Order your drinks like a gentleman. Treat me like you would any other person trying to do their job, and we'll call it even." For a moment, it seemed like Bull might explode at being told what to do by someone he clearly considered beneath him. But the combined presence of Jake, Frank, and the watching crowd held him in check. "4 whiskeys," he said finally, his voice grudging. "Please." Emma nodded professionally. "Coming right up, sir." As she moved toward the bar to fill the order, the tension in the room began to dissipate. Conversations slowly resumed. Charlie Morrison started playing again, and the normal rhythms of a Friday night at the Silver Dollar gradually reasserted themselves. Jake lingered near Bull's table until Emma returned with the drinks. She served them with the same efficiency she had shown all evening, her hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. "Thank you, Miss Sullivan," Bull said when she placed his glass in front of him. The words seemed to stick in his throat, but he managed them. Emma inclined her head graciously. "You're welcome, Mr. Henderson. Enjoy your evening." As she moved on to serve other customers, Jake caught her eye and nodded slightly, a gesture of approval that meant more to Emma than any spoken praise could have. The rest of the evening passed without incident. Emma continued to work with growing confidence, her initial nervousness replaced by the satisfaction of a job well done. When closing time arrived, She had successfully served dozens of customers, handled money accurately, and proven that her disability was no impediment to her competence. Maggie approached her as Emma was cleaning her serving platform. "Not bad for a first night," the older woman said with grudging respect. "You handled bull better than most folks twice your size would have." "I had help," Emma replied, glancing toward where Jake was having a quiet word with Silas at the bar. "Maybe. But you stood your ground first. That took guts." As Emma prepared to leave, Jake walked over to her table. "Need an escort home, Miss Sullivan? It's getting late, and the roads can be dangerous after dark." Emma looked up at him, seeing genuine concern rather than condescension in his offer. "That's kind of you, Sheriff, but I can manage. I've got my father's rifle in my saddlebag, and I know these roads better than most." "I'm sure you do, but I'd feel better knowing you got home safe." "Call it a professional courtesy." Something in his tone suggested this wasn't entirely about her safety, and Emma found herself wondering what other thoughts were occupying the sheriff's mind, but she was too tired to puzzle it out tonight. "All right then, I'd appreciate the company." As they left the saloon together, Jake walking slowly beside Emma's chair as she navigated the wooden ramps, neither of them noticed Silas watching from the window with a thoughtful expression. The saloon owner was calculating something, and his conclusions were beginning to shift in Emma's favor. After all, she had handled the evening's crisis better than any of his regular girls would have, and she had done it without causing him to lose a single paying customer. Maybe the sheriff had been right about giving her a chance. 6 months had passed since Emma's first night at the Silver Dollar, and the autumn wind carried the promise of an early winter as she made her way through Cedar Ridge's main street. The townspeople who had once stared at her with pity or curiosity now greeted her with genuine warmth. She had become as much a fixture of the community as the church bell or the weekly cattle drive. Her success at the saloon had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. Emma had not only proven her competence, but had become one of Silas's most valued employees. Her reliability, quick wit, and ability to diffuse tense situations had made her popular with customers and profitable for the business. More importantly, her presence had begun changing attitudes throughout Cedar Ridge. When old Mrs. Patterson's grandson came home from the war missing his left arm, it was Emma who helped him find work at the general store. When the blacksmith's apprentice lost his hearing in an accident, Emma taught him hand signals so he could continue his trade. But the most significant change had been in her relationship with Jake Morrison and his daughter Lucy. What had started as professional courtesy had gradually deepened into genuine friendship. Jake had taken to stopping by the saloon most evenings, ostensibly to check on the peace, but really to enjoy Emma's company. Lucy had become a regular visitor to Emma's table during the quiet afternoon hours, fascinated by the stories Emma told about life on the ranch and the ingenious modifications she continued making to her wheelchair. This particular evening, Jake arrived earlier than usual, his expression troubled. Emma noticed immediately. She had become adept at reading the subtle signs of his moods. "Sheriff," she greeted him as he approached her station, "you look like a man carrying heavy news." Jake removed his hat and ran his fingers through his dark hair, a gesture Emma had learned meant he was wrestling with something difficult. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something, somewhere private." The seriousness in his tone sent a flutter of worry through her chest. "Is everything all right? Is Lucy—" "Lucy's fine. She's with Mrs. Chen for the evening. This is about, well, it's about us." Emma felt her breath catch. Over the months, she had tried to ignore the growing warmth she felt whenever Jake was near, the way her heart quickened when he smiled at her, the comfortable silences they shared during their evening walks. She had told herself that a man like Jake, respected whole with his pick of any woman in 3 counties, would never see her as more than a friend, deserving of his protection. "Let me finish up here," she said quietly. "We can talk at my place. Father's in Denver on business until next week." An hour later, they sat on the porch of the Sullivan ranch house, the oil lamp casting dancing shadows across the wooden planks. Jake had been unusually quiet during the ride from town, and Emma found herself growing more nervous with each passing minute. "Emma," Jake began finally, his voice careful and measured, "I've been offered a position as U.S. Marshal for the entire territory. It's a good opportunity. Better pay, more responsibility, a chance to make a real difference." Emma felt her heart sink, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. "That's wonderful, Jake. You'd be excellent at it. When would you start?" "That's just it. I haven't accepted yet." He turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense in the lamplight. "The position would mean traveling constantly, being away from Cedar Ridge for months at a time. Lucy would have to stay with my sister in Colorado Springs. She won't like that, Emma observed. Lucy loves it here. I know, and that's part of why I haven't given them an answer yet. Jake was silent for a long moment, then took a deep breath. The other part is you. Emma's hands stilled on her wheels. Me? Emma, these past months, getting to know you, watching you face down every challenge with such courage and grace, you've changed everything for me. Changed how I see the world, how I see what's possible. Jake, let me finish, please. I know this might seem sudden or inappropriate or impossible. I know people would talk, would say we don't make sense together, but I also know that I've never met anyone who makes me want to be a better man the way you do. Emma's throat felt tight with emotion she didn't dare name. What are you saying? Jake slid from his chair to kneel beside her wheelchair, taking her hands in his. I'm saying I love you, Emma Sullivan. I love your strength, your determination, your kind heart, and your fierce spirit. I love the way you make Lucy laugh, the way you've brought our whole community together, the way you never let anything stop you from living fully. Tears began sliding down Emma's cheeks, but she didn't pull her hands away. Jake, you don't understand. I'll never be able to... To what? To love me back? To be a partner, a mother to Lucy, a woman I'm proud to stand beside? Because that's all I'm asking for, Emma. Not perfection. Not someone who fits other people's idea of what I should want. Just you. Emma looked into his earnest face, seeing the truth there. This wasn't pity or misguided chivalry. This was a man who had seen her at her worst and her best, who knew exactly who she was, and who loved her anyway. I love you too, she whispered. I've loved you for months, but I never dreamed. Jake's smile was radiant as he reached up to brush away her tears. Then marry me. Help me turn down that marshal position and build something beautiful right here in Cedar Ridge. Help me raise Lucy and show her that love comes in all different forms, but the best kind is the kind that sees past the surface to the soul underneath. Emma leaned down to kiss him, her heart soaring with a joy she had never imagined possible. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Jake's eyes held a promise of all the love and partnership that lay ahead. Yes, she said simply. Yes, to all of it. 6 months later, Emma Sullivan Morrison stood at the altar of Cedar Ridge's small church, radiant in her late mother's wedding dress that had been carefully altered to accommodate her seated position. Jake waited for her there, Lucy beside him as maid of honor, both of them beaming with happiness. The church was packed with townspeople who had come to witness the union that had seemed impossible when Emma first rolled into the Silver Dollar, but now felt as natural and right as sunrise. Silas Crane sat in the front row, dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief and muttering about how good help was so hard to find. Frank Carson and his boys occupied an entire pew, their weathered faces creased with genuine joy. Even Bull Henderson was there, having become one of Emma's most unlikely champions after she had helped him through a difficult period following his own injury in a riding accident. As Emma and Jake exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through all of life's challenges, Lucy stepped forward with the rings. Her 7-year-old face was serious with the importance of her role, but her eyes sparkled with delight at finally getting the mother she had been praying for. I now pronounce you husband and wife, declared Reverend Williams. Jake, you may kiss your bride. The kiss that followed was gentle but full of promise, witnessed by a community that had learned to see strength in unexpected places and love in its most authentic form. As the newly married couple made their way down the aisle, Jake walking slowly beside Emma's wheelchair, Lucy skipping ahead of them both, the entire congregation rose in celebration. Through the church windows, the sun was setting over the wide expanse of the American frontier, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Emma Sullivan Morrison had rolled into Cedar Ridge, seeking nothing more than a chance to work and earn her place in the world. She had found something far more precious, a home, a family, and a love that proved the heart recognizes no limitations save those we place on it ourselves. Behind them, the church bells rang out across the valley, carrying their joy to the horizon and beyond.